Hi, this is Katie Shell. I'm an intuitive healer and spiritual counselor. One of the modalities that I work with is astrology. And this video is about the super full moon coming up on July 3rd. I am in Arizona, so that's Pacific time this time of year, so it's going to be at 4:36 a.m. UK time, which is, the standard time, is at 12:36. So depending on obviously wherever you are in the world, it's going to be at a different time. Super full moon. The reason we call it a super full moon is because it is close. It's one of its closest points in its orbit to the Earth, so it appears brighter in the sky, and it's actually closer. With that, sometimes we'll get more. The Earth will react more to the moon, to the closer moon. So you get more things like waves, seismic activity, things like that tend to be more common around the super full moon. But just looking at it, it's bigger and brighter than it normally is. And so, and then from a kind of an astrological perspective, in on an individual basis, we're looking at a stronger release of emotions, because when we look at the full moon, it's always about a release. It is a culmination of something, so it's a celebration. We always want to celebrate at the full moon. That's why people dance into the full moon. That's why it's an exciting time, because we've been working from the new moon until the full moon on something, building stuff, creating things. And at the full moon, it's the culmination of that, and we see it, and then we start to release things that are no longer serving us, or whether things worked out or not. So this full moon, it's going to be in Capricorn. It's Cancer season, so Capricorn full moon. The moon is in Capricorn, the sun is in Cancer. So I will be talking about that access, that the duality between Cancer and Capricorn a lot. In fact, I actually started to make a video on that a little bit in my Lilith series. Not even tuning into this exactly yet, recognizing that this was coming up, but as we are intuitive, as we tune into the rhythms of the universe, as we tune into the rhythms of our own bodies and the things surrounding us, these things become into our awareness often before we even recognize them. And that's of course one of the topics I talk a lot about in my Lilith series, which and a lot of my other videos about tuning into the divine feminine, which is about tuning into recognizing our rhythms without having to put explanations and structure to them. It's sort of an aside here, but I feel it's important because Capricorn is such a structured sign, and Cancer is such an emotional sign, and we see that duality come to play as we release. So we want to look at the new moon that happened about 2 weeks ago. I believe it was June 18th was the new moon. It was in Gemini. So the things that we were building from have to do with communication and connection and thought, and duality. I talked a lot about duality and I'm talking a lot about duality just kind of in general lately. It seems to be a thing that is very dominant in my environment, and the kinds of things that are coming to me to understand things better have a lot to do with the duality between the masculine and the feminine. But again, that's more things in other places. But this is going to be another approach to that, looking at that Cancer Capricorn duality. So we're looking at that, and then we're also going to look at when the Capricorn new moon was 6 months ago. So we're looking at 2 cycles with every new moon. We're looking at the 2-week cycle, and then we're looking at the 6-month cycle. And so we look at that 6 months, and so that was December 23rd, 2022. So it was the end of last year, right before Christmas. So you want to think about what you were doing, what kind of intentions you set at that new moon, what was coming into your life to be built, to be structured. And I can attest to kind of a personal story and a thing that has, because you'll hear me talk about this in all of my videos. I write a lot in my journals, so I can kind of track these cycles, so I can have so as I'm processing them, I'm not having to explain them, but when I go back, I can review the patterns and start to understand them better. And then that is what I'm able to share with people. So there was a project that I had been invited to do around that time, and I was really in the midst of it. And I noticed in my journals that I recognized that it was probably that the way I wanted to approach it might not have been in alignment or accepted by the person that had invited me to do this with them. And in my journal, I said, I release this. And if I need to do it by myself, this is something that's really important. And it needs to be done in this, needs to be brought about in this certain way. And since then, there's been a lot of back and forth with me and this individual, sort of. And there's been a lot of delays and a lot of frustration about whether or not it was going to happen. And it basically has gotten to the point where it's not going to happen, and that's fine. But I recognize the fact of all the things that kind of went into this during the last 6 months, and where I am with that project now, and how I've taken a totally different direction from it, and am now able to release all things associated with this other individual. And there's no animosity or anything like that regarding it, but the things that had to happen over that I had to do for myself over that have to do, and this comes back to the things of Capricorn, and I had to do for myself during that time in order to get to this place have been important and profound, and really a way for me to take on more self-responsibility, and in order for me to be more in my integrity. And so that's what Capricorns is all about. It's about, what are we choosing to be responsible for? How do we do things with integrity? How do we use our stamina in order to create things that are important, that are lasting, that are supportive of other people, that are supportive of other things? Capricorn is very individual, and is very much about individual responsibility and stamina, and doing things that are important and being acknowledged for the important things. But it's also about doing things that are productive and supportive. There is nobody who's going to work harder. If anybody with Capricorn Sun or Capricorn Moon or strong Capricorn placements of any time sort, nobody is going to work harder than a Capricorn at making things happen. But they will burn themselves out because they don't necessarily take the time to slow down, and somebody needs to remind them to have fun every once in a while, because they're so goal oriented. I'm a Virgo Sun. Virgo is also very, another can be a very hardworking sign, but it's a different energy. It's about being it's about being of service. It's about noticing things and trying to fix them. Whereas Capricorn is about building and creating. And again, very, very goal oriented. And so what goals have we set for ourselves that are still important to us? How have they changed? How have they shifted? And how do we release that? What kind of emotion? And then, so keeping in mind that we are in this Cancer Sun time, what kind of emotional attachments have we attached to the things that we have set our mind to, that we want to accomplish, and that maybe it's now time to release? Let those emotions come out. If there, if there was a project or something that you wanted to do that isn't working the way you were that it was supposed to happen, it's normal to have an emotional release around that, and to be like, why didn't this work out? It should have. And then you go, or it hurt that something happened, and let those feelings be released, and release them into the earth, release them to the ethers, release them to higher spirit. So it is important that we release into the earth. And the reason I focus on releasing into the earth is because the earth takes on our pains, our sorrows, our suffering, anything or everything, anything, even our joys, even the wonderful things that happen to us. It helps us not have attachments to them, and as we release into the earth, she transforms them and gives them back to us as nourishment for the next thing. So instead of, and I invite people to do this all the time, and I will reiterate, don't focus so much on what am I trying to release. I mean, themes about what I'm trying to release are important. However, it is the specifics, you just release everything. I mean, we release everything. But like again, with Capricorn stuff, it's about things that don't allow us to be in our integrity. The things that we are not responsible for, things that we don't want to be responsible for. So keeping that in mind, some other let's see, I wanted to talk about some of the aspects to this. So we do have Mercury is conjunct the sun during this full moon. So sun opposite moon, the sun is conjunct Mercury, so the Mercury is then also opposite the moon in Capricorn. So there will be communication issues, emotional communication issues, things. So as we're identifying things, being more responsible for our own feelings, being more responsible for how we present ourselves, how we put that stuff out there, but letting them exist. It doesn't mean we suppress them. When we take responsibility for our emotions, it means we don't blame other people for them. We get out, we identify them, we move them, but we don't burden other people with them. And not to say that emotions are burdens for other people, but when we ask people to take them on for us, that's when it becomes a problem. We ask people to witness it or help co-create situations that are healthier for both of us, or healthier for me, in a relationship, something that is healthier for me. It is important to communicate that I am having an emotional reaction for it without making it the other person's responsibility or fault. It's really about that blame thing. They are not responsible for my emotions, but we co-create situations where we need to work through things, and those are different things. That's why it's important to be, what am I responsible for? What is important to me? And then speaking out. So there will be some conflict. There will be some finding balance in between emotional responsibility and actual physical responsibility, in intellectual responsibility, kind of what we normally think of as being responsible adults, paying bills, building things. Capricorn is about building roads and building structures and making sure you have a roof over your head and planning for the future. Cancer is about making sure you have a safe place, making sure you feel hugged, making sure you feel loved, making sure you have a safe place to express your emotions. And so finding the balance between those two things is going to be integral to this Capricorn moon. And then adding the layer again that it's that super full moon, so there's going to be more emotions about it. Adding the layer that Mercury is conjunct the sun, adding another layer to that emotional thing. And then on top of that, so then we've got all that going on. We also then will have Saturn and Jupiter, each to the moon. Saturn is sextiling it, and then Jupiter is trining it, which means that the reverse is happening towards the sun. So they're all kind of making this, aspecting each other, and they're all in this thing. And so Jupiter is about making things bigger, expanding things, and Saturn is again rules Capricorn, and so it is reinforcing the question, what are we responsible for? Another layer so this is really huge theme here is, what are we responsible for? What do we choose to be responsible for? So on top of that, we've got Saturn is in just went into retrograde earlier this month, or it be earlier in June. Neptune is about to goes retrograde June 30th. I'm recording this on the 29th. I have no idea when I'll actually release it, but by the time the full moon rolls around, Neptune will also be in retrograde, and Pluto's been in retrograde for a little bit too now. So we've got three of the most outer planets in retrograde now, bringing us inward. And the energy between all those is about, Pluto's about breaking down, Pluto also in Capricorn, so breaking down structures, rebuilding structures. Saturn about in Pisces about taking responsibility, about that self-responsibility. But this is all inward stuff. This is not outward stuff. This is, what do I need? What do I see? What am I responsible for? And so then we can flip it around and then take it outward again. But right now we're coming into, and then at the full moon, we're always going from building, and then we're decreasing. So we're coming back inward again. And then with the Neptune in there, it's going to be about what all of this together is about what illusions, what kind of delusional things, what it's about removing the veils of what we thought was true, what we believe to be true that may not really be true. So this all wraps up for this story for me for this last 6 months. What I believe to be true isn't necessarily true, and it's or unveiling things. It's not necessarily about truth versus fiction. It's about what is really possible, what is really relevant, what is really necessary. And when we get too caught up in these illusions that have been built up around us, trying to feed us into a certain narrative, eventually that bubble has to burst, and we have to figure out what's true and what's real for us. And then we build again, what am I asking again? I'm going to say it for the 100th time. What am I responsible for? How do I live at my highest integrity for what is true? What do I believe in? What is important for me? And what do I want to do? So that is those things. There's also more with that Venus-Mars conjunction, so more about duality, more about it's in Leo, and then Mars is going to be in Venus is going to be in Leo for a while. It kind of goes back and forth. It's hanging out in Leo. So if you got anything in Leo, Venus, because it's going to retrograde, and it's there for an extended period of time, which is unusual. Venus is often only in something for like about a month, but once it retrogrades, it could stay in a sign for a very long time, and that's going to be the case with Venus and Leo. So it is about our vibrancy and our generosity and being what's the word diplomacy and co-creating and connecting with other people in new kinds of ways. So, and in ways that allow us to be creative, allow us to express ourselves in new kinds of ways. And with Mars, for this part of it, this beginning part of it, Mars is in conjunction with it. So I'm sorry, there's like a leaf blower out here and it's a little loud, but I don't want to stop. Okay, so the leaf blower is a little quieter now. And the Venus and Mars is about passion and creativity in Leo and creative self-expression. So noticing any sort of shifts that are happening with those, and including those in your intentions of what I want, what is important to me, what I want to build, what do I want to create, because this is all playing into this full moon energy. And then the last thing I want to touch on is there is a yod between Mars, Pluto, and Neptune. And so it's an in conjuncture, a quincunx between Mars and Pluto is kind of the focus of that. And then it kind of pushes us into the Neptunian part. And short version of that, kind of the practical story of that, is really coming into recognizing power dynamics, recognizing how we use our power to go after what it is we want. Because there's a lot of kind of power, because Saturn, Pluto, Capricorn all also have to do with power. and responsibility, and taking, and how we, and kind of authoritative. Saturn always represents some, when we're looking at what it represents for us from somebody else, it's some sort of authoritative or authoritarian figure in our life. And so it's about becoming our own authority figure. And this part isn't about Saturn, it's about Pluto and Mars, but it reinforces some of those themes about using our power, using control, and understanding things, and then finding the dynamic between that energy, that Capricornian energy, and the Leo energy, and letting us be responsible for what it is we want to create. So when we use our power to create something meaningful for us, that's where the magic is. Instead of just going after something that we really want, without the stamina, without the structure, without the responsibility of the Capricorn, we kind of lose it. That leaf power. And then the Neptunian part of this yod will help. By doing that, we will help break through, again, those illusions, and come into a higher sense, a higher, more spiritual, greater connection with what it is we are meant to do, what is in alignment with our soul's purpose, by taking responsibility and going after the things we like, and going after the things we love and that mean something to us, but doing it with integrity. So, and again, being our own authority figure. Yeah, so hopefully this helps. Stay tuned for more, and you can find me at KatieShell.com. Have a great day.